I like the relatively short, simple and straightforward narrative to pull you forward type of incremental game. While the veterans of the genre like Cookie Clicker, NGO Idol and so on has their place as incremental games that take more than a year to finish and become a fixture of your life for a while instead of short video game experiences. The 46 hours of progress Spaceplan presents makes an incremental game you can replay every few years, and mixed with the visual style and aesthetics of the game, in addition to probably the best soundtrack the genre has ever seen, the game can be considered one of the best examples of what incremental games can offer. Spaceplan starts with a simplistic, polygonal view of a red planet, with your spaceship slowly orbiting said planet. You wake up, not remembering anything. The spaceship speaks to you, presumably the spaceship's AI, through the word outputter. From there, your objective is to gain enough energy to understand where you are, what the planet you're orbiting is, and find solutions to the cosmic problems you will be facing very soon as you understand the situation you are in more and more. This simple story can even be considered complex from the viewpoint of incremental games that seldom offer any narrative at all. Aside from games like A Dark Room, this is as complicated a story you are getting from an incremental game. For me, the narrative is a nice addition to the gameplay cycle and does wonders to push you forward through the curiosity of what you will discover and see next. Aside from the confines of the genre, the narrative is simple. What about the game itself? Well, the gameplay is situated in this very simplistic and clean looking visual style and UI design. Everything is dynamic in a very minimalist way, and whenever you construct different things through watts you accumulate through items you buy or through clicking, you see those items as little white circles, squares, rectangles, whatever they are. The world is slowly being filled by the items you create, and visually seeing your progress definitely helps elevate both the style and gameplay of Spaceplan. When it comes to the actual incremental mechanics, my biggest gripe with the game uncovers itself very quickly. There are only 3 things you can do in the game. Click to manually gain watts, buy things for them to automatically generate watts, and buy upgrades for your clicking power or items through the idea lister. That's it. For an incremental game, mechanically this is as bare bones as you can get. If someone has not played an incremental game before, and they open up and play Cookie Clicker for only 2 minutes, they will understand all of the mechanics of gameplay that goes into Spaceplan. And even though everything around these mechanics, the visual style, the soundtrack, the narrative are great and definitely worth the price of the game alone, the weakest thing of the game are the mechanics, or lack thereof. The gameplay does get a slightest bit more complex in what I would call the third act of the game, where you, instead of buying items for there to orbit the planet or land at the planet as buildings, you time your buy time to land the things at a certain place on the planet. However, the main satisfaction of the gameplay does not come from the mechanics, but comes from the visual responses the game presents. As you realize in the narrative that the planet you are orbiting is Earth in the future, and humanity is extinct, you decide to throw enough mess into the sun to turn it into a black hole, get into Event Horizon, and turn back time to warn humanity of its demise. As you throw mass, the solar system slowly gets out of shape, the planets get swallowed by the sun, and your rotation around the sun gets faster and faster, which leads to ever-changing visuals. The second act of the game involves almost mechanical planets that get more absurd as the game goes on. And going away from any semblance of reality and feasibility, the visuals get even more fantastical and crazy, and that's where the game shines the most in my opinion. As the visuals get impressively better and more creative as the game goes on, the narrative can become tiring in terms of writing at times. The millennial type of humor of making every upgrade and item potato based, and how the text based prompts talk about time travel in a very quizzical Doctor Who type of way where it can get grating at times, and can be a sign of the 2010 humor video games were infected with for a while. The narrative kept me somewhat engaged at most times, and coming close to the Marvel movie-like humor every once in a while, but infrequently enough to not be too grating. We need a separate paragraph just to talk about the soundtrack, because what a soundtrack that was. It is the best you can get out of an incremental game, and honestly one of the best soundtracks in a video game I have heard in a while. If you like electronic music, EDM, you definitely need to give the soundtrack a listen even if you don't play the game. The futuristic, thumping beats filled with high-pitched synth arpeggios boost the style of the game to a whole another level. This was one of the only OCTs I have sought out and listened to after I was done with the game, which is not something I do often. The last time I remember doing that was for FTL, probably. Spaceplan was definitely a beautiful experience, not being longer than 5 hours. It's a game you can finish in a day or two without much hassle. And the ending montage akin to 2001 A Space Odyssey where you travel to adjacent parallel universes to find your Earth was a great touch to end a beautiful game in an incredibly visual and psychedelic way. To be honest, an incremental game, if it was fully text-based and had these kind of mechanics, is a game you can make in an afternoon with some coding knowledge and wouldn't get more than a few points out of me. but sometimes it is all about how you dress it. And even though the mechanics are simple and the loop of incrementation of wealth drags on too much at times, the game becomes a great experience with all of its elements, and it knows how to use its simplicity for its advantage, making it one of the landmark games in the incremental genre that everyone interested should experience.